Barry Anderson, and we're here for this webinar today talking about cinematic lighting with just one light. I'm the author of the DSLR Filmmaker's Handbook. I also have done several other webinars here on Moviola. Today I want to be talking you through what we're actually going to be covering in the webinar before we get started. So there's 8 things. Number 1, what are the possible options in your location to place your talent, or where could you shoot? Also, what gear was I use, or what gear did I use to shoot all these different examples? Number 3, where are you actually going to place your talent in the room? Not only your talent, but also where you're going to be placing your light, because when you only have one, it's a very important decision. Where can you place bounce sources, or maybe there's an accent lighting in the room you could use? What you're going to use for art direction to fill in the entire frame. Also, what else do you have to play around the room? There's some of the tips and tricks I'll show you there. And then lastly, we're going to actually take a look at what the image looks like when we're all said and done. So let's take a look at when you walk into a room. What's the first thing you want to do? You want to survey the entire room and take a look at what options do you have. You know, a lot of people walk in, pick a first thing. So let's take a look here. We got a couch. We have I don't know if there'd be a love sofa. We have this other couch if we wanted to shoot the opposite direction and have a different background altogether. That would be another option to play. We could actually go back over to the kitchen table, and you have this beautiful wood table, and you can actually play the window if you wanted to do that. Some of you might actually be shooting in locations where there isn't an exterior window, and in which case you could find some set up like this, where there's a lamp and a chair, some decorations in the background would be kind of cool. A lot of us know that you want some depth, so a lot of times we'll actually take a chair and kind of place it in the middle of the room, and then kind of look and see if there's a way that you can make some of the background work. So I think after kind of quickly surveying this room, I'm going to stick to 2 options. First option I'm going to focus on is over here at the sofa. We'll come back to that. Option 2, I'm going to play over here by the kitchen table. So these are kind of the 2 areas. So let's start with what gear we'll be using. So I'm going to be shooting on the Canon 5D Mark III. I have a Canon 70-200mm zoom along with a Sachtler Ace tripod. It's a very simple setup, and for this, doesn't matter, whatever camera you have, it's going to be just fine. For my one light, I chose the KinoFlow Celeb 200. Has both a 60 and 90 degree egg crate along with a lightweight stand and a power cable. Also using a Matthews Road Rags kit, which is pretty awesome if you're not aware of this. What it has is actually, I'm using this as a silk, but it has 2 different silks, a couple black nets, and a black floppy with 2 frames and a C-stand here. Also using a 6x6 bounce that we can use to kind of reflect or kind of augment on a fill side if we want. Also brought in a 2x2 beadboard, and then I just have a triple riser stand that I bring with, because in some locations I have the height to use it. So that rounds out the gear. So let's take a look back here at our room. So we kind of see what sort of space we have as well. So here's what the camera is going to look like when we kind of set it up, shooting the angle that I want for our option here. So what we're going to be doing is taking a look at both through the camera, what the lens actually sees, and then I have some behind the scenes footage of us kind of putting everything together here in the room. You can see Milo here is my gaffer. I work with him all the time. He's a great guy. But take a look here. He's actually just kind of setting up some stuff. So what we usually do when we walk into the room is we'll kind of place things in a general area that we want to play with, and then we'll actually use either a stand-in or one of ourselves to actually kind of light ourselves, kind of make sure we're good before we actually call in talent. So right now we're just kind of placing the light in a general kind of kind of the angle that we want, the height that we want, and then you need to pick where you're going to place your talent. So what we're actually doing is bringing a chair from a different part of the house. It's a little bit taller chair than the ones that are at the dinner table, and if we moved one from the dinner table, kind of mess up our symmetry. So we're actually placing it kind of at a kitty corner angle there, so that we're playing the table as part of our actual frame. And then we're going to go ahead and test the little ceiling light. So I know this is one light, but we're talking about using one light that you're bringing with. So you can decide if you're going to turn on the overheads or kill those. So we're kind of seeing, we kind of are liking that we're seeing a little bit of the chandelier here. Now I'm going to bring in our 6x6 bounce. We're going to drop that in the back just to see what we can pick up. Now what's really weird when you're using just one light is you're not exactly sure, in this particular room there's quite a bit of ambient light coming in through the windows. And our KinoFlow Celeb is a very soft, not a super high output light. So, as you're shaping with different bounces and stuff, you might be looking to either catch some off the light, or you might trying to be catching some through the window. It was a fairly overcast day when we shot, so we didn't get any harsh sunlight that we could kind of shape. So we're just kind of playing around here, seeing what does and what doesn't work. And one of the key things is, especially if you're a one-man band, is there's a lot of this time getting it monkeying it set up before they come in. So as we're placing the bounce source here and taking a look, what I want you to think about is, imagine Milo's you and you're kind of going through all this. If you can get to your location a little bit early and do a lot of this prep work before your talent comes, especially if you're working with non-talent talent, someone who's not used to being on camera, all this little prep work you can do ahead of time is great. So we have our talent to the chair that we're going to be sitting in. We're lighting for it. We actually flopped the light from vertical to horizontal to kind of spread kind of the direction of the light, and we're actually trying to catch more of that bounce in the background. And as you can see, it's not a lot coming off it, so we're going to try to work it as close as we can to the frame, our actual camera frame that we're using, and get it in there to get as much light as we can bouncing back at our subject to give a little bit of kind of a back edge. So what I want to show you here is actually, here's a time lapse of everything that we did. So we're going to be jumping back and forth, like I said, between the actual frame that you're looking at and what we're doing. Because what I'm trying to really show you guys in these webinars is the practical side, some real tips that are going on that you can use moving forward. So a lot of times what you actually look at is we saw getting set to a frame, but now we're actually kind of filling out the frame. This is a lot of stuff that people don't do, the art direction, trying to find a little bit different. So let's take a look at what we did here. So we walked around the house. You have these little apples, and you have flowers. You have white flowers there. You got oranges. We have some lilacs that are purple. Another flower bunch here. If you come over here on top of the bin, we have different sorts of pottery and baskets. And over by the fireplace here, we have more apples and kind of this red. I don't know what you'd call this, but it's red and it's kind of cool. So we decided we'd throw that on the table and kind of see how that looked in the frame. It kind of goes with the color palette that we have going on. But again, this is just a little bit extra. So you might say, well, what does it have to do with lighting? Remember that the lighting encompasses everything, not just your talent. So when you can kind of have the light kind of shape off other things, you see these pottery, it's great. So now that we have some art direction done, what we actually noticed is there's basically built-in shears on the windows. So what we wanted to play with is what happens when you open and shut those shears. How does that affect the light, both the overall kind of ambient light, plus what does it do when seeing the shear in the frame versus not. And we had basically two different angles. We had kind of the one that was in the frame behind where the talent was going to be. Then we had this one that was hidden off screen by the wall, and you could either decide to put up the shears, leave a half shear, or leave none of the shears open. So it's kind of giving us a little bit more control than you would otherwise have if they didn't have these. So this was just paying attention to what was available to us in the room and then seeing how it goes. So again, this is what we're doing. We're trying to get in the ballpark. It's not perfect. So another thing that I do as a tip, whether I'm working with one other person or two, we'll actually set someone there and take a picture. And so we can come back and take a look. So I actually have a little remote when I'm doing it with myself. So I can come back and kind of see where the light is and adjust it before my talent gets in. So once we kind of get it in the general ballpark, then this is kind of our general setup. So this is one light, we've got a reflection. This is what it looks like before we dial anything in. It's a little bit overblown. But now you can go ahead and call your talent in. And when they come and sit into place, now, again, you've done a lot of that busy work kind of prior to them getting there. So take a look now, kind of a time lapse of what we're doing. You're kind of adjusting the light to get the exposure right. And we're playing around with the shears because, again, if you have the time, kind of allowing yourself the ability to see how does it look this way versus that way. It's part of the way that we create, because a lot of times we kind of have idea in our head, but then you get these happy accidents that work on set. So let's take a look here. It's a little bit, kind of blown out. And what we're going to do is we're going to dial the light back just a little bit. And I don't know how much of this you can see, because a lot of people, when they work with me, they'll kind of be, what are you looking for? What are you doing? And a lot of it's very subtle. So if you're not really paying attention, if you speed this up, you can kind of see the changes, but it's just over time, you can kind of tell these little subtle nuances of, is the bounce working? Is the reflector working? Is the light working? So just kind of want to show you all these different things and let it play out a little bit longer so you can kind of see what we're doing. And we're obviously condensing it for the webinar, but at the same rate, I want you to have a feel of what it's like being out there shooting. So now that you have your talent in there, you can take a look back at, the shears. In this case, like I said, I'm digging kind of the white shear, but every once in a while you want to go ahead and go back and just kind of give yourself a second to look both on and off, because maybe when you open up the shear, maybe the green pops different because she's wearing a blue sweater, and maybe you were wearing something white or black when you were taking a look at yourself in the frame. So I always kind of, if you have the time, go back in and just kind of take a few of those little extras and take a quick peek, kind of turn them on, turn them off wherever you can. So in this case, kind of opening and shutting the shears, kind of taking a look back at what works, what doesn't. And what's actually kind of interesting when you're all said and done is, again, you have so many different options both on and off camera, is all these little things just kind of, help create and separate you from other people. So when people ask you why should they hire you, why should they pay you what they do, it's these little extras that really make a difference. And this is what I'm trying to pass on in these webinars, is give you these little tips and tricks. So we're going to go ahead and leave the shear behind, but as you can see here, we decided to leave half shear open, which is actually kind of helping model. If you can kind of notice the left side of her cheek right around her ear, we're getting just a little bit more of a kick off that. Now what we want to do is take and really work in our art direction. You can see there that it was being hidden a little bit by the chair, so we're actually pulling him a little bit forward. So yeah, it definitely doesn't work in terms of symmetry of where it is in the table, but for our frame it really works. And I want to audition on and off here the light, and as you can see, it definitely creates more of a orange glow when it's on. But really what I'm paying attention to is her face, and because her skin tone is so dominated by our one light, that I'm okay that everything's going a little bit more orange in the rest of the frame. I'm okay with that. I kind of think it adds to the overall piece, so I'm okay with that. So let's take a look at what all this comes together into a final image is right here. And I think it's really, really great. We really have dimmed down that practical light. We have the beautiful shear. We have this light that's just gorgeous on her. We're getting a little bit coming through where we opened up the shear in the window and getting just a little bit of a bounce. I really think it's great. So let's go back and take a look if we were to chose over in the other side of the room, over here by the sofa. So let's take a look. So I see video content all the time like this, because obviously interviews are shot all the time. So again, this is our one light that we're going to place kind of as our key light, but what we're going to build here is kind of what people tend to think, or what you see a lot. And I'm going to show you kind of both how this works and how to make it good, but then I'm going to show you another tip on how to take this exact same setup and make it just a little bit better. So again, we place our one light, we go ahead and take a look at what's around. We have a practical light here that has 3 different settings. It's got one bulb right, one bulb left, or both on. In this case, we're going to try and audition both of them on. And we go ahead then, once we have those kind of set, we're going to go find where we want to set up the camera, at what height do we want to be, what do we want to see, how wide or how tight do we want to be on the subject. And once we spend just kind of a few minutes getting that settled in, after we get our lights roughed in place, then we start to kind of take a look around the room. What else do we have to control? Do we have to turn off the overhead lights? Is there another light we want on or off? Are we seeing a reflection we don't want to? So in this case, we don't like this extra lights creating too much kind of an orange pitch there that draws our eye to the left of the frame. We want to keep the center of the frame where we want our eyes of the audience to go. So we killed that light. And then we kind of go ahead and drop in our talent. So now this is kind of our starting point. So I want to reframe once she's in there, kind of feel it was cutting her off her legs a little bit differently, or a little bit not in a way that I liked. So kind of get this dialed in. So this is going to be what we're going to be framing and lighting for. So now at this point, we're just roughed in. So now we want to go through and actually kind of bring it to fruition. So we're going to start paying attention to all the little things. We're going to see, do we like the light ratio on her face? Do we like, kind of the brightness of the light behind her? What are we seeing in the frame that's distracting us? What could we add? So let's take a look here kind of behind the scenes again and what we were doing when we were in the room. So we decided our light was way too high and it was actually a little bit too far kind of around. So we're going to bring it a little bit more forward. And I want to note that we're using these 60 and 90. We're actually doubling up our egg crates because we really want this light to be directional, because if we just let it kind of soft and diffuse and kind of spill all over, it really just kind of illuminates everything. And we really want to focus it on the talent's face and on their body, and then really kind of let it drop off from there, because it really draws your eyes to it. So we're using those egg crates, I think, in every single setup in this. So once we brought that light around, what we want to do is we want to see what's happening here with the shear. And when we pull the shear in, it acts a little bit more diffused, and when we open up, it doesn't. So what we want to do is kind of pull it in as close as we could to the edge of frame and see kind of what it does. And then we kind of come back and we notice that there was 2 pillows there in the corner that we were just seeing these little little bits and pieces of. So we took those out, so that's not going to be distracting for anybody to look at. You just take a few minutes there just to kind of look at where we're at. So we had a little, we set up a different monitor, so we actually became a little bit more overcast here. So you can see it's a little bit darker, even though it's the same setup. So we're adjusting the light because we don't control all the light in this given location, but it's our job to make it work. So once we get that readjusted, then we go ahead and try to bring in our bounce. And this is a very, I guess, real world application. What you can see here is where can we get this thing to work? And as we're trying to kind of fit it into the environment where we are, what we notice is we can't actually set it up at an angle where it's doing anything, where it doesn't end up in our frame. So obviously having a hand, a black spot, a silver chrome piece of an edge of a frame, none of that works. So we have to abandon that, even though it's something we want. But that's why I have this little 2x2 bead board or foam core or some sort of whiteboard, because this is small enough we can kind of set it down here on the chair. We can get just enough of a little bit kind of coming up toward her eyes and kind of filling in a little bit under. So we go ahead and find a way to kind of get that placed in there and working for us. And then we go ahead and actually go back to checking out the shears. And when the bounce card, what didn't have enough because of the overcast to kind of kick back what we wanted, we actually pulled back the shear because again it was off frame. And what you're going to notice here when we show you that we're just getting a little bit more modeling there on the side of her face, kind of before and after. So we're going to toggle back and forth and just kind of watch her right shoulder. It's catching at the top of the sofa, and it just looks a bit nicer. So we were trying to do that with a bounce card and with the little bead board, but neither of them worked. So let's take a look at what it actually looks like here when we brought all these elements together. It's a nice, it's a nice little setup, and there's nothing wrong with it. But what I want to show you is, again, how we did it all from the start. The light's a little bit farther over, and this is kind of what people, don't really realize. A lot of times we rough things into place, or even if we pick where we want it to be, sometimes there's elements in the room that force us to kind of make an adjustment midway through. It's very common. It's one of those things you don't have to feel like you don't know what you're doing if your client's looking at you and you kind of adjust partway through. Another thing to notice here is partway through we went again from a horizontal to a vertical. We really want to keep that light focused and really up and down on her and not spilling onto the couch. So we chose which orientation we wanted the light. And then this is going to go back to this big question of where do you place talent. So we're using the exact same kind of framing. We want to be looking in that direction over there, but instead of actually placing her on the couch, we're going to place her on a chair closer to the camera. And the reason that we're going to do this is kind of a tip to show you how you can take something that looks pretty good and make it look even better. And we're going to explain all the reasons why. But a lot of times people get used to just kind of putting people in the elements in the room. They'll put them in a chair that exists. They'll put them in the sofa. They'll put them at the desk, whatever it might be. I'm trying to get you to think beyond that. What you want to do is actually place your talent somewhere where you can get proper or good or interesting lighting. So by pulling the subject away from the window, especially, we're actually fighting a lot less with all this different angles of light that's coming onto her, and we can really focus on lighting her with just this one light. Also, it allows us to kind of drop off the background a little bit so that we get a little bit more, I guess, we pull away the attention from kind of the surroundings and put it really on our talent. So this whole section here, I just decided to do a picture-in-picture so you can actually see both what the camera's seeing for our hero shot, but also some of the behind the scenes of what we're kind of doing, getting things set into place. And what we actually wanted to do this time, we wanted to show you two different setups, because a lot of people ask me, how do you decide where to place key? And there's so many different reasons, like where is the light source coming from? If you're having it come through a window, then you're going to key from the same side, or if you have them looking across camera, a lot of people want to light into the key. So what I want to do is just show you what it looks like here. So if a lot of our light's coming in from the windows, we're going to go ahead and key from the opposite side and just see kind of what that does. We're going to kind of take a look. Do we like it? Do we not? Again, part of why I do these webinars is I want to show you some real world, both good and bad or indifferent, so that when you actually see these, you can kind of say, hey, next time I want to do it like that, or I like what you did there. And sometimes it's not really a right or wrong, just sometimes how you set something up, just it just works or it just doesn't work, and the next time that's not always the same case. So let's take a look here. Another thing I wanted you to notice is, even though we're using the egg crates, this is a really soft light to begin with, and I work with a lot of people that have gotten out of the habit of diffusing their light. So I'm going to show you what happens to the subject's face, both when you're using a light just kind of as it standardly is diffused as it comes, and if you add diffusion yourself. So as you can kind of notice here, as we're kind of moving the lights, because we have the egg crates on, you can pretty dramatically see it on her face, how much is going to the right, the left, up, down. And again, we're really trying to control where that light goes. So if you are using any sort of LED soft diffused light, having something like egg crates will really help you in being able to kind of control and shape your light. Otherwise, you're really just spilling light everywhere, and at the end of the day, you're not going to have a shaped light, and you're not going to have the quality that you want. So that's one of those tips that definitely you should be doing and or acquiring if you do not already have. So what I want you to see here is we have our key light coming from Talent left. We're bringing in a bounce card and basically a fill card. So this is where it gets really complicated. People say, hey, I need lights. And so what we wanted to kind of force ourselves into here is what can you and can't you do? Because sometimes if you don't have the right tools, you can't actually do a job. Sometimes your creativity will allow you to work with less. So as you kind of watch us kind of move it in and see how much, because we have the light directed directly at her. So if we remove the egg crate, then we can kind of get more spill that will then go over onto our bounce and fill the offside of her face there. And a lot of this is just playing, kind of trying what works and what doesn't. In an ideal world, we wouldn't be lighting with just one light. But there are times where either you don't have the tools, or just if you're flying on a plane or you're going in somewhere where you have to be a light footprint, you can't always have everything. So sometimes it's about learning tips and tricks like this that will help you get better. So we took off one of the egg crates. Now you can see clearly in the picture window that we're getting a lot more light on the fill card. And there's a little bounce card right to the side behind that. I'll explain. I can't remember exactly what we did there, but I'll explain it here as we go through. But what we end up kind of deciding is we're rotating her to kind of see where can we get that light to wrap around her face properly. And as we kind of worked through this whole process here, we just decided we didn't really like it, and so we were going to go ahead and flip our key and kind of relight on the fly. So again, this is something that I've had to do in front of clients. It's not something you have to be embarrassed or ashamed about. Sometimes you just try something, and again, they're expecting you to be the professional. So if you look at something, it's better to make it better at the moment than regretting it later. So this is one of those times we just decided, hey, we're going to scrap it. We're going to flip our key. So now watch as this comes together. So instead of showing you all the behind the scenes, I just want you to focus on how the light kind of builds on her face. So you can see when we're touching the light, when we're bringing in a fill light, when we're dimming it. And so as we kind of jump back and forth, we'll just kind of fast forward it here, kind of speed it up a little bit so you can kind of see how it's going. What I also want you to do is we went back and decided, like the other one, we're playing with the shears. So we're going to go ahead and shut the shears, which will actually cut down our ambient light, but it also gives us a totally different background. So, again, try things. In this case, we don't have a lot of the other warm tones or other elements out there, so I think it turns it into too bland of a room. So we actually want to open them back up, keep some of that color going, seeing some of that green. I think that really helps kind of augment everything. But when we open them all the way, then you see that weird window pane. So we decided that we'd pull the shear back, kind of cut it off, and then it just gives us just a little bit of a touch. It's a little paint stroke on the left-hand side, and I think that actually ends up looking pretty good. So what I also want to do is say, hey, if you don't have a light, when a lot of people say, hey, we'll just shoot natural light, this is kind of exposing the face approximately properly, and nobody would want that. So if they pay you to come on in and use the light, this is more what you get. So again, I want you to see from the very beginning, we place our where we want our talent to be. We rough in where we want the light to be. We go ahead and place the talent in there. We adjust the light. We bring in our bounce and fill cards. We don't get what we want. We go ahead and flip the key. We go ahead and let that light kind of wrap around her face. We're liking how that's working. We play around with the practical lights. And again, like I was talking about, we really want to diffuse the light even further. So I'm using my Road Rags kit, and that helps really kind of take and kind of help the light wrap all the way around her face from just being a little bit, I guess there's just a lot of times it still feels harsh. Play around with the shears, find exactly what we want to do, cover up the ugly, the frame there in the window, and then we kind of turn it on and off, showing you what it looks like if you expose without lights. And then we try a little bounce card, but there's just really not enough there, so we just live with our having our fill and bounce. And this is more or less what we get for our final image, which I think looks remarkably better than the other side. So let's take a look at the three different ones. So this is our first setup, our final lighting look. Again, we lit this with one light. that we brought in, which I think looks pretty spectacular. It looks kind of like a painting to me. Second one, this is a perfectly passable one, but you can notice there on the right side of her face, we're getting a lot of light coming in through the window. So I think it's just kind of a mediocre shot, but if we pull her back and we control that light, just look how beautiful that light wraps around. We're seeing a big catch light in her eyes. Just enough detail there in the background. It just really is great. So I want to thank you guys for spending time with me here today. I know everybody's busy. I want to make sure that you guys have my contact information. Please feel free to email me any questions. We did cover all the equipment here. I'm sure we can send out a list of all the equipment that we've used. It's not to say that one camera is better than the other or you have to use this light. A lot of these techniques will work for whatever you have, but if you guys have examples you want to send me, if you have questions for setups and how you'd like to do it, just send them on over to me. I will stay online here. Go ahead and ask me questions, but thank you guys. Have a great day.